Hannah Reed was the kind of mother everyone trusted. The smiling face on Maple Lane, always seen pushing a stroller beneath the oak trees, until the night she passed out drunk beside a running bathtub, and her baby, Lily, never woke up. The sun rose over Willow Creek, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and gold. It was the kind of morning that made everything seem peaceful, the kind of day when nothing bad was supposed to happen. Hannah Reed woke up early, as she usually did, to the sound of her baby stirring in the next room. Lily's soft coos filled the small house, and for a moment, everything felt normal. Hannah smiled as she lifted her daughter from the crib, pressing her face into the baby's warm hair. She loved Lily more than anything. That much was never in question. On the outside, Hannah's life looked perfect. She had a cozy home on Maple Lane, a beautiful baby, and a husband serving overseas who sent her messages every night, reminding her how much he missed her. To the neighbors, she was the image of a devoted mother, always pushing a stroller through the park or sitting on her porch with Lily in her lap. But behind closed doors, things were different. The house was often quiet, too quiet. Some nights, she cried after putting Lily to bed, staring at the empty chair across from her at the kitchen table. She told herself she was just tired, that everyone felt lonely sometimes. But the ache inside her didn't go away. Hannah had always enjoyed wine. Just a glass or two to unwind, she used to say. But after Lily was born and her husband left for his deployment, that glass became a bottle, and the bottle became 3. The routine comforted her. It dulled the silence and blurred the edges of her anxiety. She told herself she was still in control. She woke up every morning, fed the baby, kept the house clean. That meant she was doing fine. But slowly, the boundaries between relaxation and dependence began to disappear. That Sunday, she promised herself it would just be one drink. She had spent the morning cleaning the kitchen and folding laundry, humming to the radio. Lily had giggled from her playpen, babbling to her toys. The afternoon sun streamed through the curtains, warm and golden, and for the first time all week, Hannah felt almost happy. She poured a glass of wine and sat at the table, scrolling through pictures of her husband on her phone. One glass turned into another. The laughter she heard in her own voice began to sound forced. She poured a third. The room felt lighter, and so did her thoughts. She wasn't thinking about the bills, the loneliness, or the sleepless nights anymore. She was just floating. By the time evening came, the bottles stood empty on the counter. The smell of alcohol mixed with baby lotion hung in the air. Hannah looked at Lily, still cheerful in her high chair, and smiled with a kind of foggy affection. She told herself she would give her a nice warm bath before bed. It was their little ritual, a peaceful way to end the day. She didn't notice how unsteady her hands had become or how heavy her head felt. The bathroom light flickered on, the sound of running water echoing softly down the hallway. Outside, the sky was fading into dusk, and the quiet street of Willow Creek grew still. Neighbors walked their dogs, unaware of the tragedy quietly forming behind the Reeds' front door. In that small house, what began as an ordinary Sunday would soon become the night no one in town would ever forget. The bathroom filled with the soft hiss of running water, steam rising in delicate ribbons that fogged the mirror. The scent of lavender bubbles drifted through the air as Hannah leaned against the doorframe, watching the tub slowly fill. Her movements were sluggish, uncoordinated, yet she felt calm in a strange, distant way. The light above flickered faintly, and the small bathroom glowed with a warm, hazy tone. Lily sat in her bouncer nearby, clapping her little hands, her laughter echoing faintly against the tiled walls. Hannah hummed a lullaby she barely remembered from her own childhood. The tune was uneven, her voice unsteady. She poured a bit of baby soap into the water and watched as bubbles formed on the surface, thick and white. The sight made her smile dreamily. Everything felt slower, softer, as if time itself had relaxed with her. She lifted Lily and gently lowered her into the tub. The baby splashed happily, tiny hands breaking the water's smooth surface. The sound was light and joyful, a contrast to the heaviness in Hannah's chest. For a few moments, it was peaceful. The warm water shimmered, the bubbles reflected the dim bathroom light, and Lily's laughter filled the small space. Hannah sat down beside the tub, resting her head against the cold tile. The alcohol in her system made her thoughts drift like clouds. She thought about her husband, the way he used to make her coffee every morning, the way his absence felt like a hole she couldn't fill. She thought about how hard it had been, being alone every night, pretending everything was fine for everyone else. She wanted to stop thinking altogether. Her eyelids grew heavy. She told herself she would just close them for a second, just long enough to catch her breath. The sound of the water mixed with Lily's soft gurgles became a kind of lullaby. The edges of the room blurred. Hannah's breathing slowed. Her body felt weightless, her mind drifting between sleep and waking. The clock on the wall ticked quietly. A minute passed, then another. The gentle splashing faded until there was only the faint dripping of the faucet. The air grew cooler, the steam thinning. Lily's toy duck floated near the edge of the tub, turning slowly in the water. The soft hum of the bathroom light was the only sound left. Outside, the sun had completely disappeared, and the house stood in near darkness. The television in the living room played quietly, no one there to change the channel. Time kept moving, silent and indifferent. The once comforting warmth of the bath turned cold. The stillness spread through the house like a shadow. When Hannah's phone buzzed from the counter, the vibration echoed faintly through the quiet. It went unanswered. Her head remained tilted against the wall, her breathing deep but uneven. The phone stopped buzzing, and silence reclaimed the room. The water rippled once, then stilled completely. In the stillness of that small bathroom, something irreversible had already happened. A few seconds of rest had stretched into something far longer, something that could never be undone. The scent of lavender lingered, innocent and deceptive, as the house fell into a silence that would not be broken until it was far too late. The sound that pulled Hannah from her sleep was not loud. It was the faint buzzing of her phone, vibrating against the counter, a small noise in the heavy silence. Her head jerked up, confusion clouding her mind. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was. The bathroom light seemed too bright, the air too cold. Her gaze moved to the bathtub, and in an instant, everything inside her froze. The bubbles had vanished, leaving behind water that was pale and still. Lily's small body floated near the center, face down, motionless. A scream caught in Hannah's throat but never fully escaped. She stumbled forward, slipping on the wet tiles as she reached into the tub. The water was icy now, a cruel reminder of how much time had passed. Her hands trembled as she lifted Lily's limp body out of the water. The baby's skin was pale, her tiny fingers curled inward. Hannah's mind went blank with panic. She shouted her daughter's name, shaking her gently as if the sound of her voice could bring her back. Nothing happened. The only response was the echo of her own desperate gasps. She fumbled for her phone, dropping it twice before managing to dial emergency services. Her voice came out slurred and broken as she tried to explain what had happened. The operator's calm words blurred together in her ears. She tried to follow the instructions, pressing her hands against Lily's chest, breathing into her small mouth. The silence between each attempt grew heavier, the seconds stretching endlessly. When she heard the distant wail of sirens, it was already too late. The paramedics arrived within minutes, but time had lost its meaning. They found Hannah on the floor, sobbing, clutching Lily's blanket. The bathroom smelled faintly of wine and soap. One of the responders lifted the baby from her arms, laying her on the hallway floor to begin resuscitation. The flashing red lights from the ambulance painted the white walls in sharp, shifting color. After several attempts, one of the paramedics shook his head. The words were quiet but final. Lily was gone. The police arrived soon after, their presence filling the small home with an air of cold authority. They asked questions that Hannah could barely process. Her speech was slurred, her breath heavy with alcohol. They noted the empty bottles on the counter, the water still in the tub, the faint bruises on her knees where she had fallen. One officer quietly took photos while another led her to the living room. She sat motionless on the couch, staring at the floor, unable to look toward the bathroom. The neighbors gathered outside, drawn by the flashing lights. They whispered to one another, trying to understand what could have happened. To them, Hannah had always seemed like a devoted mother. The idea that her baby had drowned while she slept seemed impossible. But as the stretcher was carried out, covered in a small white sheet, the truth began to take shape in the murmurs spreading down the street. Inside the house, the air was heavy with silence and the lingering scent of lavender. The detectives moved quietly, collecting evidence, their expressions unreadable. One of them paused by the tub, noticing the faint ring of water on the porcelain, higher than it should have been for a baby's bath. He made a note in his book, frowning slightly. There were no signs of struggle, no injuries other than the marks from attempted resuscitation. As Hannah was led outside into the cool night, the weight of what had happened began to settle in her chest. The flashing lights illuminated her face, pale and streaked with tears. She whispered something no one could understand, a string of words lost in the wind. The officers placed her gently in the back of the patrol car. The door closed with a quiet click. In the darkened bathroom, the faucet dripped once, then again. The ripples spread across the cold, still water before disappearing entirely. The days following the tragedy passed in a blur of confusion, sorrow, and unanswered questions. The news spread quickly through Willow Creek, reaching every corner of the quiet town. What had once been a picture of normal family life was now the center of a police investigation. Reporters gathered near the Reed home, their cameras flashing as investigators moved in and out. Hannah's face appeared in every newspaper, her eyes red and hollow, a photo taken the night she was questioned. To the public, she was either a heartbroken mother or a negligent monster. Detectives began piecing together a timeline of that evening. The neighbor's security camera footage showed Hannah leaving her house around 7:30, just before the emergency call was made. For 20 long minutes, the footage captured an empty driveway. When she returned, her car headlights flashed twice before the house went dark again. To investigators, that gap in time became the most puzzling part of the case. If Lily was in the bathtub, why had Hannah left? They searched her phone records next. A series of messages appeared between Hannah and a man named Greg Walker, a bartender at a local tavern. The tone of the messages grew more personal over time, hinting at an emotional connection that went beyond casual friendship. The last text sent from Hannah's phone that evening read, "I just need to see you." Investigators discovered that Greg lived only a few streets away. When questioned, he admitted Hannah had shown up at his door that night, clearly intoxicated. He said he refused to let her in, worried about her state, and she drove off without another word. Forensics returned with their findings. The bathtub had been filled much higher than Hannah initially claimed, nearly to the brim. The water temperature was another detail that didn't match. When paramedics arrived, the water was ice cold, which meant Lily had been submerged far longer than the 10 minutes Hannah had described. There was also residue of spilled wine on the bathroom counter and fingerprints on the rim of the tub, faint but distinct. Confronted with the inconsistencies, Hannah finally admitted to leaving the house. She said she had been overwhelmed, panicked, and needed a moment to clear her head. She insisted she thought Lily was safe in the shallow water. She said she never meant to hurt her. The detectives listened silently as she spoke, their expressions unreadable. When she finished, they told her the results of the autopsy. Lily had drowned quietly, showing no signs of struggle. The findings supported neglect rather than violence, but the emotional weight of the truth remained crushing. Public opinion turned harsh. Some called for compassion, saying Hannah had simply made a terrible mistake. Others demanded justice, describing her actions as unforgivable. The story spread beyond the small town, appearing on national headlines and talk shows. Each retelling painted a different picture, some of a grieving mother, others of a selfish woman driven by loneliness and addiction. At night, in her holding cell, Hannah replayed the moments before she fell asleep. The smell of lavender, the faint hum of the bathroom light, the soft sound of water moving around her daughter. It all came back in pieces, fragments of a life she had destroyed with one careless choice. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Lily's face, peaceful and still, surrounded by bubbles that no longer shimmered. Outside, the world kept spinning. The neighbors went back to their routines, but the Reed house remained silent, curtains drawn, yard untended. Inside the evidence room at the police station, a small pink towel lay sealed in a plastic bag, its edges still faintly smelling of baby soap. It was a quiet reminder of a moment that had changed everything, a single night that had turned love into loss and confusion into something much darker. The trial began 6 months after Lily's death, drawing an uneasy crowd to the courthouse each day. Reporters filled the front rows, their pens moving quickly as Hannah entered the room in a pale gray suit, her wrists trembling slightly. The charges were serious: involuntary manslaughter and child endangerment. The prosecution painted her as a woman who had chosen alcohol over responsibility, describing her actions as reckless and inexcusable. They showed pictures of the bathtub, the bottles of wine, and the timeline that proved she had left the house while her baby was still in the water. Each detail landed like a stone in the heavy silence of the courtroom. The defense took a different approach. They spoke of her exhaustion, her isolation, the strain of raising a child alone while her husband served overseas. They reminded the jury that she had called for help, that she had tried to save her daughter when she realized what had happened. They described her not as a criminal, but as a broken woman who made a terrible mistake she would regret for the rest of her life. For days, the courtroom became a space where grief and judgment collided, where every expression from Hannah was analyzed, every tear scrutinized for sincerity. Witnesses came forward, neighbors, friends, the bartender Greg. Each added another layer to the story. Greg's testimony drew the most attention. He confirmed that Hannah had come to his house that night but insisted she hadn't stayed long. His voice faltered as he admitted that she had looked desperate, her eyes glassy and unfocused. The prosecutor asked if he thought she was capable of caring for a child in that condition. His pause before answering spoke louder than his words. When the time came for Hannah to testify, the courtroom grew still. Her voice was soft, often breaking as she spoke. She admitted to drinking too much and to leaving the house briefly, but she swore she never meant for any of it to happen. She said she loved Lily more than anything, that she still heard her daughter's laughter in her dreams. Her hands shook as she described the moment she woke up and realized the water was silent. There was no defense strong enough to erase the image of what followed. The jury deliberated for 8 hours. When they returned, no one moved. The verdict was read in a quiet, measured voice, guilty of involuntary manslaughter. The judge's gavel echoed through the courtroom as Hannah lowered her head, tears streaming down her face. She was sentenced to 12 years in prison, with eligibility for parole after 8. Her husband, who had returned from deployment weeks before, sat in the back row, his expression hollow. Months later, in her prison cell, Hannah wrote a letter that would never be sent. In it, she confessed something the court never knew. She hadn't gone to Greg's that night seeking comfort. She had gone to buy more wine. She had texted him only to cover her tracks, terrified of being seen as the mother who couldn't control herself. She wrote that she couldn't bear to live with the truth anymore, that her own weakness had drowned her daughter long before the water did. The letter was found tucked beneath her pillow after a routine cell inspection, folded neatly and unsigned. It became part of the official case file but was never released to the public. In Willow Creek, time continued its slow rhythm, but the Reed house remained untouched, its windows dark and empty. Some nights, neighbors said they still heard faint humming when the wind passed through the trees, a soft lullaby drifting from the shadows, carrying the memory of a mother, her child, and the night that ended them both.